Lip from Limit being added as well. So it looks like we are ready to go as Method NA and Angry Toast are squaring off in our first series of the day on the Underrot.
Alright, so the Underrot, we're gonna see some crazy pulls, as Sarah mentioned before, especially because it's a non-fortified setting and it's teaming Volcanic, so no undeath affixes, and this huge pull, as you see on the left side by Method NA, without even using Bloodlust here.
Yeah, already right away on the pull, you see them running down with using 2 DPS to actually pull both patrols on the left and right side, pulling those into the pack, and actually pulling all 3 of these initial packs at the start of the instance. No early deaths from them. When we were watching these pulls earlier this morning, they were having some random deaths from usually JB or the tank, so good to see that no deaths happen in this first pull. The thing to look at here for Method NA as well is they don't have a rogue to do the typical shroud skip past this first pack with the Befouled Spirit on the right side, so they're going to have to use the Ring of Peace from the Monk as well as the Shadow Melts from everyone to skip by, so we'll see if they're able to pull that off cleanly here. Whereas we're seeing just, you know, a lot more smaller pulls come from Team Angry Toast.
Yeah, and you just saw the strength of the Mistweaver Monk here as JB was pulling 200k HPS on that very first pull, and at this point they were just ignoring all of the mechanics as the Matron Cleave. I think 2 people get hit by the Matron Cleave, which is usually an ability you definitely want to avoid because it leaves a nasty dot behind. It does a lot of damage and you usually just die if you get hit by it, unless you have some sort of immunity. But because of the huge HPS output by Wave the Crane from JB, they actually managed to stay alive and just ignore those mechanics, just nuke everything down. That's the power of those 2 Unholy DKs, as we see on Method NA side, as they're working on the first boss now.
We're not seeing Team Angry Toast opting to use the Shroud to skip past that trash pack here. It looks like they're just going to be Shadow Melding instead. They did accidentally pull Elderly Exa, but it looks like they're just going to go ahead and go into the boss as well. Hula dropping low and Zuli actually going down. They don't have a battle res for him, and it looks like it's going to be a full team wipe for Angry Toast. If they just committed their Shadow Meld to skipping that pack, they're not going to be able to skip it for a while, especially if that Shroud is also on cooldown. So already just big trouble from Team Angry Toast here. You got to remember, this is also a Tyrannical dungeon, so these bosses are going to take a while for them to get down.
Yeah, and interesting, I'm not really sure if they were, if this was a planned pull to do the trash with the boss, which theoretically is something you can do because, again, there's no undeath affixes, no bolstering, nothing like that. So in theory, it's a possibility that you can do, especially if you have an Unholy DK and you can somehow get single target damage. But on the first boss, it seems a little bit difficult to do.
Yeah, that definitely looked like it was a mistake from them. Like, it looked like the rogue ran too far into the room and got too close to the boss on the way through and just accidentally pulled aggro on the boss. Now, since it was probably only aggro on the rogue at the start, they probably could have vanished, but, you know, I think it puts the whole group in combat, actually, so that's just a complete lie, and I made that all up. But as we're talking here, Method NA does get the first box down, and we're going to see them instantly go into another massive pull. They're going to take a while stacking everything up together, because they're going to be pulling all 5 Blood Swarmers in the room, and they're also going to be pulling all of that into Kragmaw. We see the pre-bubble coming out as Lighty, on Lighty as they set up for this pull here.
Okay, I'm excited to see this pull as Lighty used this Lightfoot Potion to gather up this pull, and immediately the bubble, as you mentioned, come out for the pull. Usually, while the tank is pulling, it can be very dangerous for the tank because he doesn't want to use his defensives just yet when he's gathering everything up. But you can see the insane amount of mobs here gathering, and now the Bloodlust is being popped.
And you can see there's those fixate icons, those fixate icons on the player. There's 2 on Shakib, 1 on JB, 1 on Yoda. Those are the players you have to look at. There's going to be a lot of damage going in on them, but man, you can just see the massive amount of damage. Between the DKs, over 8 million damage, and you know, Yoda throwing in a couple million DPS too, no problem, popping the Fell Barrage, getting everything down. And in addition to almost all of the important trash being dead, the boss is also at 65% already with that Unholy DK burst. So a pull that we saw go wrong multiple times this morning, it looks like they ironed out the details and they got it together here. This is looking good for Method NA.
Yeah, you can just say that, like, they're showing up in the tournament play here, which is very interesting. Sometimes we see teams like pull something off in practice, but then they don't pull it off in tournament play, and it looks like Method NA is the complete opposite. They were wiping over and over in this pull earlier in practice, and now tournament play, they just pull it off very cleanly, not a single death, and the amount of damage coming out and the amount of control you need to do this kind of pull is crazy.
And it's important to mention they did leave some trash up in the room, and of course when there's trash up with Kragmaw, there's a chance that he can tantrum over towards those mobs and pull them for you, so they opted to just pull the trash mobs with the boss so they didn't have to deal with any of those extra blood ticks, and they're going to go ahead and cleave it down once again with their massive cleave they have from the Unholy DKs. It shouldn't be too much of an issue here from them as long as they get it down before that next tantrum.
Yeah, so we see on the other side, Angry Toast, unfortunately, they did have to do the Awaken mob to get to the boss, which is probably something you don't want to do. They probably planned on doing it with the last boss, So definitely another time loss they had to endure, as they're still fighting Elderly Axe at 38%. They also lost their Bloodlust, by the way, which they did use earlier as well. So definitely a huge time difference now between Method NA and Angry Toast. And I don't think they can pull off the same thing as we saw by Method NA either. That means that this whole Kragnar room is also just going to be slower by Angry Toast as well.
Yeah, I think you're right with that point. And I mean, look at the efficiency here from Method NA again. Also just making sure they get more trash in the last 20% here. Using and abusing the Unholy DKs to their massive advantage. Just perfect execution from them. The fact that they were able to pull it off, like we mentioned, even after we saw them having troubles with it in practice, just ironing out the details, making sure they got it down, really shows just the kind of caliber of team we have here. I don't want to like use that as an excuse to talk down on Angry Toast. They were our 10th seed in time trials, and they just kind of got thrown in at the last second. You know, when the time trial standings come out and you see you're the 10th rated team, you don't really expect to play. But, you know, it turns out at the last second, I believe our 6th seeded team, One Last Chance, had to drop out for a reason. And then the 9th seed, who would have taken their spot, also had to drop out. So they, you know, kind of got in the last second. Didn't have as much practice as you would normally like to see from a team. And I think we're just kind of seeing the results of that here.
Yeah, that's a very good point, especially because I mean, none of the teams really know the affixes from the tournament maps outside of the time trial maps up until I think it's 1 or 2 days before the actual tournament. But you can still practice some things. For example, they could practice like a last boss pull with the kiting strategy and so on, right? So even if you don't know the affixes, you can still practice a little bit if you know that you're going to be in the tournament. Of course, Angry Toast didn't know, and therefore they probably didn't put much time into practice at all, as you mentioned, and therefore we're probably not going to see as big of pulls as we see by Method NA on the other side, as they're still working on this Awaken mob on Method NA.
And it's important to mention, like, Angry Toast is not just a team full of completely random players as well. I mean, 2 of the names stand out completely to me right away. You have Deswind, who is a high key pusher for almost all of Legion. He was you know, a stand-in for the Method NA team whenever they did high keys on live. And of course you have Mitt as well, Coach Mitt, who was one of the Windwalker monks for Method NA in season 2, I believe. So they definitely have high caliber players on their team. You know, they're not someone you can just scoff at and say, man, I could do it too if these guys could be in there. So they're definitely up there in terms of their player quality.
Yeah, we see another big pull come in by Method NA here as they pull a bunch of mobs on top of Sporcrawler Sanja. Now this is also a pull they wiped on earlier in practice, so let's see if they can pull it off this time around, as we see the fixates by the Bloodswarmers, which they pulled from the side actually, on top of also having all of these caster mobs, the defilers that needs to be interrupted, but they died so quickly. I mean the boss is also on 70%. The amount of AoE damage coming in by the Anhole is just insane for these kind of pulls.
Yeah, I mean, you're just seeing it, and this is I think this is where we saw it, you know, at first back when Reaping was the major affix about a year ago in the first season of BFA MDI. I think Underrot is where we first saw Unholy DK come out, because you can do these massive trash pulls into bosses, and they were so good at doing that. We're just seeing the personification and perfection of it here from Method NA. This is really what this class can do whenever you have your pull count pretty much tailor-made to pulling trash on top of bosses. The only trash pull they've done that wasn't on top of a boss was the first one of the dungeon. Outside of that, every single bit of trash they've killed has been with a boss.
Yeah, exactly. Just making use of that faster might stacks, increasing the strength of the Unholy DKs. One thing I wanted to mention about the Sporcrawler Sanja just now was that they actually didn't get rid of those mushrooms there. And the reason why was because JB, of course, used his revival to get rid of all of those debuffs, which are diseases that is stackable depending on how many mushrooms went off. So that's why it's just a little bit of a damage increase. If you don't have to run out and actually get rid of those mushrooms with the upheaval, if you can just stand in melee, keep DPSing, and then walk out so this Swirly doesn't spawn in melee range, just a little bit of a damage increase, but it's still worth it for the MDI. Of course, every second counts.
Yep. I mean, these guys are just playing perfectly. And you see, they do have a couple debuffs there. They didn't quite get all the mushrooms there, and they didn't have the revival that time, but JB doing a good job keeping them all up, and they're going to be totally fine. Just a little bit of extra healing there, of course. That's the healer's job. The healer's job is not to do damage, it's to heal. Surprisingly enough, that is their name.
Is it, though?
Well, you know, some people would say otherwise, but, you know, let the damage dealers do damn. That's their job. The healers can get it in, but make sure you keep your team alive. That's #1 priority for them. They are an 87% trash, so they do need a little bit more trash before they get to those final 2 Guardians, just about 8%, and then once they have that down, they'll be able to move on to the final boss, where we'll see them pull the boss with the remaining 4 Awakened mobs they have left.
Yeah, so 13% trash, really not that much. I assume they are going to pull these skeletons here. These Guardian packs are usually something that they like to pull just because it gives a decent amount of percentage. And this, especially this last area here, has a lot of single mobs that are very difficult to pull on top of other mobs. Like, for example, the worms are hard to pull because they don't move, right? So they're stuck in place. They need to be constantly interrupted. And you have these corruptors as well, the faceless corruptors, which spawn the tentacles, to do the frontal cast. They're just like very annoying. That's why this skeleton pack is just very nice to pull on top of everything else.
Yep, completely. And they also managed to pull it into the 2 Guardians, like you mentioned, which is something we've seen some teams opt not to do. Or not do as well because they don't want to make sure they pull any of those danger noodles, which we haven't talked about a single time in this entire MDI so far. Rest in peace, Sloot Bag. We'll miss you. But yeah, I mean, you know, not a single one of those noodles pulled because they don't need to. They've got their trash count from Awakened and making sure they're pulling trash on top of bosses. Also, good point. Want to point this out in the first match of the day. We heard you guys last week. There is a tooltip for you guys. If you go to, I believe it's mdi.gcd.tv, you can check out what gear, talents, corruptions all these players are using. So check that out. We don't have an extension yet, but if you go to that website, you can check it out there.
Yeah, one more thing to note here about Underrot is that they need to reach 100% trash to be able to get to the last boss here, and this is why they're at 100%. Otherwise, they would be under 100% because, of course, the Awakened mobs also give a little bit of percentage, trash percent. So, unfortunately, in Underrot, you do have to go a little bit over percentage because of this very reason. Just the gate is not opening until you reach 100.
Yeah, it almost seems like a little bit of oversight, and I've seen some teams talking about that in the MDI Discord. It does seem like an oversight with the Awakened affix that you have to get to 100% trash before going to the final boss, because you do get 4 mob count coming from each of these Awakened mobs, so you're pretty much missing out on, you know, 4 times however many Awakened mobs are left in terms of the dungeon. You're being inefficient. Ooh, careful, JB. He was at 3% there. That was scary. Yeah, he's got the curse as well, so spooky from him. He's got 3 stacks of that debuff. He's taking a lot of damage, but it looks like he's going to be just fine. That was a scary moment from them there. I mean, you never want to see your healer drop that low. They do have 2 battle reses, so it probably wasn't the end of the world, but we know, especially when you've got those Awakened mobs alive on this boss where there's so much damage intake, that if your healer goes down, you don't have that much time to keep yourselves alive.
Yeah, this is especially scary. I think they were also a little bit unlucky that the curse is going on JB and not anyone else, because it also is a cast speed reduction. So, and since he can't dispel it himself as a mystery where he can't dispel curses, you just have a hard time keeping the group alive, especially when there's so much incoming damage with all their Awakened mobs alive. But JB doing a good job keeping himself alive and keeping the group alive as well while having this curse on him.
Yeah, that was that was definitely a spooky moment. But with Voidweaver Mouth here going down for them, looks like they'll be totally fine. You know, it's kind of interesting. They didn't have their Bloodlust up for that pull, which is something that we usually see teams save their Bloodlust for. So maybe, you know, they did it so fast that I don't think they were planning to have their Bloodlust up for it. But man, that was spooky fast. I mean, these guys are absolutely trucking this dungeon right now. Looks like it's going to be a sub 14-minute run, probably 13:30. So, I mean, if we compare that to our times from last week, I'm interested to see what the difference is there.
Yeah, they used their Bloodlust in Kragma's room, right? So they had to save it for that pull, I assume, because otherwise they probably would have used it at the first pull and then again in the last boss. But if they can't pull off this Kragma pull without Bloodlust, then it makes sense to just use 1 instead of 2, because that pull is going to save you so much time in Kragma's room.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's definitely the play. Yeah, this is going to be about 2 minutes faster than the pulls we saw last week, with the only major difference being Quaking versus Teeming. Now, Teeming does add a little bit of damage because of the Unholy DKs and their exponentially scaling AoE, but still, this is an impressively fast run from what we saw from the teams last week compared to this week. Method NA is absolutely torching this dungeon, and with this last blood bar getting filled up for Unbound Abomination, the final 2 blood visages are going to spawn, and when those go down, it's going to be a very easy, quick 1-0 for Method NA.
Sanitize.
And what a performance as well. I mean, they have 0 deaths, what a clean run, and it's the first game of them, and I'm already incredible by Method NA. I mean, if they keep this up, it's going to be hard to beat them.
And without a doubt, is Method NA taking a very strong and impressive Underrot performance right there. And as you guys were mentioning throughout the run, you know, they cleaned up a lot of their mistakes, and they really got rid of like a lot of their jitters early on there, Ratnos.
Yeah, it was an impressive run coming out from Method NA there. You know, they did the dungeon in like 6 combats or something, which is a ridiculously short amount of time. And no deaths as well from Method NA there, so looking very, very clean from them.
That's right. And we'll be seeing, you know, again, a lot of high expectations for these guys as well as Ironic. And in fact, you know, with NA and EU being split, a lot of eyes are on Method NA to be that team that is setting the bar for everybody else in the region.
Yeah, I mean, especially after making roster changes, right? They swapped out Nerf as their tank for Lighty, and then they brought in Lip as a DPS to replace Lighty as a DPS. You know, when you're a team that's been so dominant in a region, they were, you know, by far the best NA team last MDI. You know, in changing your team comp up, you kind of have a higher expectation. Your team better be better than it was last year, and it's going to be hard to make a comparison, especially with just one map done. But so far, these guys are looking pretty solid from making that roster change and, you know, playing with it.
Well, that's the thing is, like, we want to be able to see from the beginning what these guys are capable of, and when we look at their European counterpart there, Nagura, Method EU had a slower start last week, but they really started picking up pace over the course of the weekend.
Yeah, so Method EU, I mean, we expected them to do well just because they're always so consistent, or they were so consistent in the past, and they ended up winning the whole thing. We were, after some games, I thought maybe Perplex is actually going to do better, and maybe Perplex is going to be the one winning this time, but Method EU, of course, proving you wrong again, just winning the whole thing last weekend as well. And Method NA, I mean, after this performance, maybe they're just gonna, like, win the whole thing again on their side of the ocean.
And we shall be seeing onto that one. And as we think about it, we also are going to have to look at, you know, the next dungeons that are coming up for these teams, because as we know, you know, Dranos seems to be a lot more difficult affixes than having to deal with Tyrannical, having to deal with Teeming and Volcanic, excuse me.
Yeah, you know, that was kind of a warm-up dungeon where there weren't really affixes involved in every pull. But the next thing we're going to be up to is a Tyrannical Explosive Grievous Mechagon Workshop. Those are some affixes that will absolutely impact the gameplay, so it's going to be really exciting to see. This is actually one of the dungeons that was a time trial dungeon, and we saw a lot of different compositions coming out from different teams in this dungeon. You know, we saw some mages from a lot of different teams, actually, but Method NA decided not to use one in their time trial round of Workshop and had the best time of any team in that time trial, so maybe they know something everybody else doesn't and have a better comp here.
Yeah, well, before we go into the workshop, let's start talking a little bit about those 6 combats, the 6 pulls, really, that Method NA had here.
Absolutely, yeah. So they were really pulling together everything that you could reasonably pull all at once, plus a couple more things in most pulls. We saw a first pull of the dungeon that included pretty much everything from like all sides of the bridges. And then they went and did the first boss just tame by itself. But then after the first boss went down, that was when things started to get wild. We saw Lighty like mounting up, getting a life cocoon while he was mounted, and just yeeting on in there and grabbing half of Kragmaw's room and pulling it with Kragmaw. Then they fought, you know, the rest of Kragmaw's room, and then the skeletons in front of Kragmaw's room while Kragmaw was still alive. And then things got really wild. You know those patrolling blood swarmers that like are flying out in the middle of nowhere that are
nobody ever touches on live?
Nobody ever touches. Yeah, there's like they're on the Method dungeon tools. You can click on them, but like, why would you? Well, Method NA was like, well, those things are worth some count, and you know our pull is too small right now, so we're gonna throw some axes and pull a couple of those in on this this pull into the third boss, and that was exactly what they did.
Those guys look like good things to bring along, not dangerous or anything.
Yeah, they're just like, oh, we'll just make J.P heal it. That's his job.
Well, they pulled 5 or 6 of them with Kragmaw, so what's a couple more for the Spore Color pull, right? They're fine.
That's true.
Yeah.
That is very true onto that one. And like you said, just a couple of pulls. And we've had a lot of interviews with Method NA in the past, Ironic, where they always sort of felt like they were pressured and they were continuously pushed to be better by their European counterparts. Now it's also really cool to see that the pressure's on them to perform and to be, you know, setting the pace, and right now it shows that they're doing so, and we'll be looking to see that again out of them in a workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we know that they also had that #1 time in the workshop in time trials as well, and I think Dratnos touched on this just a little bit. They didn't run a mage in workshop, which we saw from a ton of other teams. What we saw them run was double hunter, demon hunter as well. So they really are, you know, honing in on that single target consistent damage from hunter. And I'm interested to see, you know, how it works out for them not running any mages. You know, Method NA historically has been a team that tends to go against the grain in terms of what the major comp is. For all of MDI in 2018, they ran that double Windwalker Warlock comp, even in dungeons where, you know, like Black or Cold, where if you ran a mage, you would pretty much insta-win. They just tend to go against the grain in terms of what meta comps are, so I'm going to be interested to see how it works out for them here.
Right, and you know, we've seen time and time again how there's been a little bit more comp diversity throughout this season, and especially really Dratnos has been those hunters that have just been absolutely destroying mobs.
Yeah, Beast Mastery Hunter's really well suited to whenever you can't really make use of an Unholy Death Knight to go off in big pulls. Beast Mastery Hunter's really, really well suited for a mix of AoE and single target. They really work well in Tyrannical Workshop because of that single target that they bring, but they're happy doing any number of targets, and they're also effective at killing explosives, which is an active affix in this dungeon. So I think it's a really good choice for Method NA to bring 2 of these, and I think they're versatile and likely to be very high damage overall too.
Yeah, we'll be expecting to see out of them, and we're getting ourselves ready and making sure all the players are set before we get started with our second game in the series. If you guys just tuned in, Method NA won the first round against Angry Toast on the Underrot, and we're getting ready for game number 2, which will be on the Workshop here. And as the players are getting themselves ready, also important to note that one last chance, the usual 6th seed was unable to make it to the tournament, as was the 9th seed, so Angry Toast is going to be coming in as the 8th seed as well, so we will be able to see how they do squaring off against our number 1 seed in Method NA as we are ready to go in the Workshop.
Alright, so I think this might be a bit difficult for Angry Toast to beat Method NA here in this dungeon, especially because there was, I think, a 7-minute difference between them in the time trials, and also they were running a little bit of a weird comp, right? They were running Holy Paladin, Demon Hunter, Mage. So we'll see what this Holy Paladin brings, and they also seems like they're playing a Shadow Priest. So yeah.
People already think I'm a hater of Warlocks. Now I'm gonna be a hater of Shadow Priests after this. I'm gonna start hating real hard here in a little bit. Yeah, that's an interesting comp just position out of Angry Toast, so interested to see how that works out for them. But if Underrot was any example, I think we're gonna see Method NA absolutely fly through this dungeon. Both teams so far doing the exact same thing. That hammer does the same damage to the angry little tonks there, regardless of what your team comp is, so that's not, well, I mean, Method NA already killed the tonks faster with that hammer, so maybe they're just, better RNG players in general, but we're gonna see them both pull the same boss here, it's a little duo of mechs, and get on their way throughout the dungeon. We're gonna see that single target damage coming out from the BM hunters here, though. These things do a ton of damage.
I'm excited for the Shadow Priest damage, to be honest. As we see, Method NA actually used their Bloodlust for the first boss here, and Angry Toast is using theirs as well. Now, here at the start of the workshop, there's not a lot of variety at all, actually. You need to clear the trash first, and then you do the boss. There's nothing else you can do. That's why most teams just choose to use the Bloodlust here. Otherwise, you just need to hold it for so long.
Yeah, and I like the POV we have of Lydion here. You can see what his job is as the tank. While his squad is over off dealing with no mercy for you, he's just kiting the Platinum Pummeler around, getting it underneath those hammers so we can smash that Platinum plating off of it, which makes it takes reduced damage, and once you have all the plating gone, you can start doing full damage to it, and that's just what the tank's job is here. He just kites around the room while his team gets to have fun.
One thing to note about this boss with Tyrannical and Grievous is the Flame Bend. So it actually starts casting a Flame Bend once in a while that does a huge amount of AoE damage to the whole group. No matter how far away you are, it still does damage to you. And on top of having Grievous as well and Tyrannical, it does quite a bit of damage, and that's why we saw the teams drop so low. But they probably only get one Flame Bend because of the amount of damage they have. So as long as you just use your defensives for this one AoE that you get here.
Yeah, and it's definitely a scary affix, but that's pretty much the only damage output in the fight. As long as you aren't getting hit by those gears that spin around the room, it's not going to be too dangerous of a fight. Just 1 or 2 heals will get you. You just got to yell at your healer for 1 heal and you should be totally fine. Looking at the side of Angry Toast, I mean, the Shadow Priest isn't doing that bad of damage. It's almost keeping up with the Fire Mage, which is pretty much a class that's known for being just a pure damage output class in terms of, what Combust brings, especially on cleave targets. So it's not doing that bad, but it is 2 spread dot targets, which is kind of where Shadow Priest should excel as well. So not really sure how I feel about that so far. I'm gonna not talk about it that much. The utility?
Think about the utility, yes.
Oh,
so they
like
have the Hurt Embrace.
Oh, yeah.
Exactly, helping out with Grievous, right? They have Mass Dispel, which helps out with the Fear Awaken mob, so they could pull the Fear Awaken mob with the last boss and just Mass Dispel the Fear? Huh?
Wow, that's well, what if they get feared? How can they Mass Dispel if they're... If you time it perfectly, yeah, you're right. You can dispel it. You're right. Yeah, you're right. I was thinking you can dispel before you got fear, but that's just completely wrong. We did see a little bit of a spooky moment from Method NA. They had like 5 explosive orbs spawn at the same time, but they all managed to line of sight at the exact same time and get out of it. So good on them there. But they ended up just pulling the rest of the trash into Cujo, and they're going to go ahead and cleave it down, no problem with the boss, and they're just going to get the boss down with trash. They opted to completely skip that first awakened mob as well, which isn't something that we've seen from a lot of teams. They're just going right in there, and they're going to probably pull all 4 awakened mobs at the last boss, which is going to be incredibly scary to see from them, especially with just the 2 melee interrupts.
We actually saw some trouble here on Angry Toast side as mid went down, and then we also went going down here. And this looks like a complete disaster now at this point, as they were everyone's going down at this point. I think they were pulling the whole trash together, and then I think mid just died to the explosion from the waste, and then Deathwind just followed afterwards. And all the mobs reset now. Unfortunately, they did manage to get down the smaller mobs, but the bigger mobs reset now, so they'll have to do the same pull again.
Yeah, definitely not what you want to see from them, unfortunately. But it looks like Method and A is just going to slowly move on here. Is Angry Toast now just pulling the trash? They're just going to probably, yeah, that's what they're going to be doing. They're just going to be pulling the trash and getting that down, so when their cooldowns come up, they can go back to the boss. Little unfortunate to see out of them there, but I mean, once again, we mentioned this last dungeon, Angry Toast is our 10th seed. They didn't know that we were going to be playing this tournament until 2 matches ago. So, sorry, until 2 days ago. So they didn't have any time to get practice in, and, you know, it's pretty understandable to see them struggling in a dungeon they probably didn't get that much practice in.
So one thing that we just saw on Method May side from this boss is that you can actually feign death the jump from this boss, and it will always jump the furthest target first. So if one of the hunters just goes further away and they will get the first jump, they can feign death as soon as they use it in the right moment, and then it will cancel the rest of the jumps. So that's a small little thing to increase your DPS, because the jump itself is probably not going to kill you in a 19 Tyrannical. It doesn't do as much damage, but it's still nice for a damage increase so the boss doesn't jump it.
Yeah, right. I mean, that's something that we didn't really see. You know, that's something that we would have liked to see from more teams last week, and we kind of called it out a little bit, but it didn't really happen. Little weird from Method and A. You don't actually have to pull these neutral mobs here in this area, but they're just going to go ahead and use it for free extra cleave damage, I suppose, which is weird because they don't have an unholy DK. I wonder what the reason for that is. Yeah, they wanted to get more explosive mobs. That's really the question. You can just single target the alarm bot down and not have to worry about, you know, AoEing at all there. But I guess it's not really that big of a deal. The neutral mobs aren't really going to have that much of a chance to kill you. No problem there for Method and A as they get through this gauntlet. And Angry Toast is just whittling away at Cujo now.
Actually, I think they probably wanted just to buff their overall damage.
Ooh, yeah, true.
That's probably.
Yeah.
One more thing to note about this boss here that we see on Angry Toast side is that you can actually position yourself on this box. If you go all the way to the side, if you just like step a little bit forward, you're still going to be line of sight to not get the AoE damage, but you can still attack the boss. So it's like a small little like yard or two where if you stand exactly there, then you can DPS the boss and you don't get hit by the AoE, and that's what we've seen Angry Toast do there.
Yep, and we're going to see them probably do it again here. Ooh, I don't think the boss is quite close enough to that box to get it down this time, so they're not going to be able to do any damage, unfortunately. A little bit of efficiency from him there. But, I mean, at this point, that's kind of the least of their worries, right? They kind of need Method and A to wipe a couple times for them to come back in the dungeon. Right now, it's all eyes on Method and A and that double hunter comp that they're running. I'm interested to see how close to the time trial time they can get here, because, as you know, and as we all know, getting close to your time trial time in competition is definitely how prepared your team is for these dungeons.
Yeah, and their time trial time was 15:53, so less than 16 minutes actually coming out of Method and A. They were the #1 seed, as we mentioned, so if they can go close to that time, or we saw some teams even beat their own time trial time before in tournament play. So we'll see how they do. For now, it's very clean by them. They have 0 deaths so far, and it looks like everything went as planned. Of course, we don't know what their strategy looks like, but it looks like nothing really went wrong so far. So definitely on the track to beat their time trial time, or at least come close to it.
Okay, so Method and A isn't going to be pulling all 4 Awakened mobs at the final boss. They are opting to pull Voidweaver Malthy here. This is the interrupt mob, which we were talking about. They do only have 2 melee interrupts, so they wouldn't be able to get every single one of the interrupts on the mob, which would be a little bit dangerous on the final boss. So getting that down before the final boss means you don't have to deal with it then, and they only have to deal with 3 Awakened mobs there. And also just heading straight into the 3rd boss here. They don't have their Bloodlust available. It is a Tyrannical boss, so it'll take a while for them to get this down. And, oh, they're just pulling trash with it. Also scary as well. This is going to be an interesting pull here.
Yeah, so one thing to note, what they just did there is that if you're in the awakened area, if you're inside the portal, and someone pulls the boss, so if you get in boss combat, you will get pulled out of the realm immediately. She keeps actually getting hit by the beam here, unfortunately, but hopefully they can keep him alive, as there's a lot of outgoing damage here with the trash and the boss at the same time. But yeah, she keep going down actually. They will have to use an engineering battle res to get him back up. You can see Lip casting it right here. Some explosives going up as well. This is a little bit scary for them here.
Yeah, spooky for sure. Not what you want to see, because of course your hunters are typically the class that deals with those explosive orbs. So with one hunter dead and the other hunter being the person rezzing, that means their demon hunter had to swap to explosive orbs, and everyone knows demon hunters, they get really angry if they have to swap to explosives. So that was a scary moment from there. Of course, Yoda standing his ground, making sure he didn't actually have to do any meaningful damage to explosive orbs. Yeah, a little bit of scary moment. They'll have another battle res up in about a minute, so they'll have that up for the final boss, unless somebody else also decides to eat a beam here. But yeah, scary moment from Method and A, but they're able to pull it together here.
Yeah, they did recover now, and it seems like they didn't lose too much time from having this one death, so they can still go close to their time trial time here. And just to continue the thought that I had before all of this started happening, so if you pull a boss and anyone is in the Nyalotha realm inside a portal, you will get pulled out of the realm immediately, and that's what they did here. They were pre-positioning in the boss room, and Lighty exited the portal, ran through the trash, and then pulled the boss to pull everyone out.
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's how they ended up pulling the boss there. Yanking him out of the Nyalotha realm, so they didn't have to actually, run through all that trash, and the tank could just make sure you had aggro on everything. Little small changes to make sure that they're a little bit more efficient. Also of note that a lot of people don't know, the center pillar on this boss is actually not line of sight, so you can DPS through it as a caster or as a ranged player, so you don't actually have to be on the same side of the boss in order to do full damage. So that's why you'll see hunters sometimes on the other side of the boss from other side of that pillar from the boss, because it's not a major deal. It's kind of weird though. Usually these center pillars are line of sight, but it's just not in this case.
Yeah, and another thing about this boss is this boss is just very scary. There's so many things going on at the same time, as you can see, all these abilities that you need to dodge, because they do a lot of damage, and it is a tyrannical setting here. It might only be a 19, but if you get hit by one of those abilities, it can definitely put you below 50%, so if you get hit by two, you might just die. And especially on top of having Grievous and maybe an explosive going off here and there, as you can see the whole group dropping incredibly low here. So definitely need to play very good, especially if you pull trash on top of the boss, to be able to survive this boss fight, and you don't want to get hit by any of those mechanics.
Yeah, onto the least efficient trash pull in the entire dungeon, these two spider tanks that you just have to cleave on their own. Which, as you know, being efficient in these dungeons is, you really want to pull as much as possible together, but having to cleave two of these always feels bad. Of course, there's a slight efficiency. If you kill the further on down spider tank, it does spawn that vehicle that takes you to the next platform more quickly, so we see teams focus that one down first to spawn the RP coming in right now, and by the time they get the second one down, they'll be able to almost instantly click on that and move on to the rest of the dungeon. So just being efficient on the side of Method and Egg, getting it down. They've got this dungeon practice well. And what was that time again to look at for the time trial time? I think it was 15:53, you said?
Yeah, 15:53 exactly, yeah.
So we'll see if they're able to make that mark. It looks like they're on pretty good pace right now.
Yeah, and we see Ahutos on the other side, they're still working on this Void Weaver here, they Awaken Mob. I do think we've seen almost every team so far actually kill this Void Weaver mob, just because if you don't use this Awaken Mob, you need to just walk through the gauntlet by itself. And that just seems like a slower thing to do than to actually kill the Awaken Mob, it seems like. Then that's why I think almost any team has dealt with the Void Weaver so far. And they're actually committing their bloodlust here, doing the same pull as we see Method and A do. The whole trash on top of the boss. So let's see if they can pull it off on their side as well.
Yeah, and like you said, committing the Bloodlust. Method and A did not use Bloodlust here, so if they're not able to pull this off, it's probably going to be just the end of the competition dungeon for them, because they won't have Bloodlust available for this pull. But you can see the power of Fire Mage there as well. It's doing full boss damage here. Every single cast for the Fire Mage is going straight into the boss, and because they're able to stack that mastery percentage corruption on the tournament realm, they have something like 10 or 11,000 mastery when they have their combustion up, and they have 3 stacks of that blaster master trait that gives them mastery for whenever they hit Fire Blast, which means their ignites are doing about 100% of the total damage of each one of their casts. So he's probably getting 220k ignites spreading to every single mob, so he's doing full boss damage and also just doing a ridiculous amount of damage to every other mob. And that's kind of the benefit of running Fire Mage in this dungeon. You can really get key combustions on trash by also doing full boss damage.
Yeah, and it looks like the Shadow Priest now returned as well from his short AFK at the start of this poll, as he now started beating the Proud Warrior, unfortunately for Shadow Freeze. Oh no, he's actually going down as well. Just to say that I'm so sorry, I take it all back.
Cast your
But
curse.
they do have an Engineer Rest available to get him back up as soon as they get a second to cast it here. Now, this is also a boss where Engineer Rest is not so easy to cast because you need to go close to the body and you need to cast the Engineer Rest. As we can see, the Demon Hunter actually just now going there and getting him back up. There we go. So that's a little bit of a downside of using the Engineering Rest over, let's say, Druid Battle Rest.
And yeah, Mid also used his Netherwalk in order to get that battle res off too. He like you said, it's scary. And the thing is, it gets scarier as the fight goes on. We were talking about this earlier. You know, as the fight goes on, more and more of those gears spawn, more and more of those little flame circles spawn. So there's more things to dodge, which means your chance to get that 4-second cast off, you know, further on in the fight is super, super dangerous, and it gets worse. You know, part of the reason Method and A didn't have an issue getting that res off is because the death happened almost, you know, at the start of the fight, at the very first flame bid, so they didn't have too much of an issue getting it off. But yeah, scary moments from both teams trying to get those battle reses off on this boss. Looking over on Method and A though, they're getting on just fine with this pull. Blood of the Corruptor does go down, which is probably the scariest mob that they have to deal with after the Fear mob, which went down first, of course. And once that Blood of the Corruptor goes down, it's just the Tank Buster, but they've got plenty of Hunter taunts available for that, so it shouldn't be too much of an issue for Lighty.
Yeah, still a very dangerous pull here, this boss on a Tyrannical environment with all of the Awaken mobs, so well done on them. As Yoda goes down, unfortunately getting hit, it seems like by the cutter from the boss here. They do have one battle rest, and the Hunter can probably use it to get them back up. But yeah, still third death now at this point, so they gotta watch out. They do have no more battle rests left after this one.
He also had a thing from Beyond spawn right before he died to that cutter as well, so he took a little bit of extra burst damage too. Only did about 30% of his HP, but I mean, having any death to that extra corruption, I think that's the first corruption-related death we've seen, or maybe noticed, I guess, this entire NDI. Yeah, that's, you know, it's a little questionable. You don't want to see people going down to that. Another thing for Beyond spawning over there too, you can see it did about 30% of his HP. Thing to remember though, especially in this Grievous area, you know, one of those things from Beyonds gets you into Grievous range, makes your healer have to catch up, your healer can't do damage, has to do more healing. It kind of snowballs a little bit, so, you know, and I wonder if that's, you know, something that they just got comfortable running, or if it's more of just a, you know, weigh the negatives. For a Demon Hunter, they already take reduced magic damage, right, so it makes sense to put on a Demon Hunter. I doubt the Hunters are running more than 40 Corruption, but, you know, when you see a death happen to Corruption, you kind of have to question the choice to run that much, right?
I mean, one thing to note though about Corruption is that even the eye that spawns will get you into Grievous immediately, because as soon as you get any sort of damage, no matter how much it is, you will get Grievous, right? So no matter if you run 20 or 39 Corruption or 50, any eye that spawns will just immediately give you Grievous, and therefore it might not, maybe they think it's not a big of a deal because of that fact, and therefore they just run as much as they would otherwise. I'm not really sure, but definitely don't like seeing those kind of deaths to those things from Beyond, and then yelling at the healer for one heal.
Yep, one heal. Always one heal. Now a little bit of a scary moment here. That little mechanical pull does a lot of damage to the entire group and pretty much gets everyone in Grievous range. So JB's gonna have to heal everyone out of that. But once everyone's out of Grievous range, the danger's kind of gone. They just have to make sure they don't get knocked off the platform here, and they'll be totally fine. Omega Buster already down to 40% HP, and Hunters are just gonna do Hunter things. Lots of single target damage coming out from both of them here, over 100k. But on the side of Angry Toast, just more things going wrong for them. Hula goes down. They do have a battle res for her, but
I can't find
at this point, I think it's just too little too late for them. Method and A is cruising to a victory here.
Yeah, as the Omega Buster is on below 20% now, and this is actually a pretty dangerous boss with Grievous and Tyrannical. As we can see, everyone dropping pretty low as they get this sap on them. Not only does it do an initial burst of damage, but it also leaves behind a pretty nasty dot, and therefore, well done by Method A to bring down the boss here as they win this first series against Angry Toast 2-0.
I hope the bracers don't drop. There's not a mage in their group. Man, that would be a travesty if like some socketed corrupted bracers drops and they didn't have a mage to give them to. Yeah, Method A looking strong as ever in their first 2-0 here.
That's